What's up? BigHerc916, positivity, motivation, never settle for average. You know how we do it over here. You know, I often hear people talk about what they would do for money, what they would do for fame. And when you are confronted with that trade-off, what would you do? I remember when we were young, me and the homies sometimes used to, make jokes, and, dudes would talk about what they would do for $1 million. Oh, for $1 million, man, I would let so-and-so touch my booty. I'm like, oh, for $1 million, bro, I would, walk naked through this thing and, put honey on my nuts and let ants bite on my nuts. So you're like, dudes that do some crazy stuff for money, man. Guys who are in a state of mind where they have nothing to lose, they would do practically anything for a few dollars, and when that few dollars is done, then they would have to go to the next as far as what they would do to get the money. And you've seen it on Fear Factor, some of these shows, man. And literally, man, people are selling their souls for the price of fame and success. And it could be a number of things, man. It could be, for a man, it could be your manhood. You're this tough guy. You're this guy who's always carried yourself in a certain way, but you get in a certain circle and the guy says, hey, man, I could, change your life. And you're thinking, well, shit, change my life? What do I have to do? And their answer is, well, we want your wee-wee or we want your booty. And the dude's like, damn, man. And, that's why you don't hear a lot of men talking about the sexual exploitation in Hollywood, because they had to give up the wee-wee or the booty. They either had to knock one of these dudes down and bust their cheeks, or let somebody bust their cheeks. And it's like Terrence Howard said, once you done gave up your manhood, you can't get that back. That's a wrap, man. That's once you've been violated like that, man, it's like, that's everything from there. The energy, they basically, it's something that you try to live with, but as far as coming back from that, there's no coming back from that. And to each his own. I'm not trying to sit here and judge you, but, it wasn't worth it for me to let nobody bust my cheeks to get a big role in a movie or to, become some famous Hollywood actor. I would rather go do something else, man. I'm like, it's not, the trade-off is not, to me, that significant. I don't care about people like wanting to worship me or be somebody in the limelight for the sake of having a look in the mirror, knowing that my cheeks got took, or I gave them up, or I had to take somebody else's cheeks in exchange. And then when you see these people, because it's a small circle, you might see them in certain places and they smile at you and you like, man, you're disgusted. That's why you got a lot of these dudes and people, you wonder why they are drug addicts or why they contemplate suicide and all this stuff. It's like, these dudes are rich. They got everything, beautiful wife, kids, but see, their wife and kids don't know that they had to get their cheeks busted or bust somebody else's cheeks. They don't want to talk about that part. They just talk about the roles they play, these roles that have made studios billions of dollars. And for the women, it's the same thing. Sell your soul. You got some decrepit dude and he wants to get on top of you and bust. He wants to bust in that thing, man. He wants to bust some cheeks. And this guy, he's married. His wife knows it's part of the game. They do this thing, and the women like, well, it's gonna be a life changer, a game changer, and they go along with it. And then there's regret down the road. There's depression. There's a lot of things that you have to try to live with. And after you got these awards, whether it's an Oscar or Academy, whatever the case may be, you try to think, well, was it worth it? But if you were to go through and look at the people who have been through rehab and Hollywood entertainment and the music industry, it's a who's who. All those people, man. If you're in the hood and you're dealing with like poverty, family members that are drug addicts, people that are getting in and out of prison, alcoholism, then, going to rehab, you can see why those people would maybe be addicted to certain substances, family members turn them on to stuff. I mean, it's just, and then, when you're poor, you can't really afford rehab. Not like these people go to. But when you go to rehab out here in California at one of these places, you got people who, their lives, man, they had it made. I mean, millions of dollars, mansions, hanging out with these celebrities, going to parties, and they're trying to somehow mask the pain. And that's what it means when you sell your soul, man. It could also be maybe a sacrifice. Maybe, you didn't know, but somehow something happens to one of your kids. Now one of your kids is in a situation, you're like, how'd that happen? And you get that wink, You cannot go through the fire unscathed. You're gonna have some burns somewhere. Maybe something happens to your mom, maybe a grandmother, maybe a cousin, maybe a friend, maybe a brother. And it might look like an accident. But you're like, damn, man, everybody has these accidents. You look at these people and good friends of theirs have overdosed, or, some maybe a shooting, or maybe some type of, illness. You're like, and it happens. Yeah, it's important. People, regular people, they have things in the family, but these things, they stand out more because a lot of times they just don't make sense. A lot of them appear to be like they could be accidental or natural, but the person who's tied to that individual, the way they react to the situation, which, there's a lot of grief, but they know whether or not they sold their soul, and that was the trade-off. And some people just don't care, like, well, shit, look where I'm at. And then they try to make up for it the rest of their life, doing all these different things to try to help maybe other people, or maybe they find Jesus. But selling your soul sometimes is a cost of fame and success. You got to ask yourself, is it worth it? And I'm not saying everybody sold their soul. I'm not saying you have to sell your soul. If you work hard, for myself, man, I write, I do art. I do a lot of different, things as far as in the entertainment space, but it's not worth it to me, man. And the people is like, you can have money, but having power is something else. So you could be a multimillionaire, but a person who has the power, he can make that multimillionaire come to a party and engage in some activity that the person with the power doesn't have to be involved in, but can facilitate. And that's power, because they're playing with chess pieces. This is their world. They line it up and it's entertainment for them. And when you start getting into those circles, there are certain feelings, if you want to go past, you might be confronted, man. Maybe you might get invited to a party, and if you go to that party, you go to another party, then you go to that party, then, you get tapped for something else. But realize that once you sell your soul to whatever you want to call it, to the devil, to Satan, to Baphomet, to Baal, to some entertainment company, to some music label, to some studio exec, dude, that's a wrap. You got to live with that. And to those who don't really mind that this is their life and they're gonna do, and they want to live it out to a fulfillment, then to them, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do whatever it takes and embrace that life. But at some point, your soul kind of like, it wakes up. It may have a conscience one day. It may be on your deathbed. It may be as you get old, you start saying things, and and once you kind of have served your purpose, You might be the next trade-off. Maybe, yeah, you made some hell of a moves for your family, for your legacy, but then you're taking out the game. Or maybe they shit on your legacy, somehow through one of those parties they got something on you, and your whole image is being this Hollywood hunk or this sexy diva comes out that, man, they were blowing your cheeks out back to back. you was a bucking bronco. It's a dirty game, man. And when you see certain people, like some people, they don't even have talent. And you look at them and they're balling and they're talking all this shit. And you're like, what'd that person do that I didn't do? How'd they get there? And then you go and you try to, listen to them, or maybe you meet them in person. You realize, like, damn, this person's a straight idiot, but yet they're rich and famous. Well, you don't know. And they're never going to tell you, because that's the game. And if they sold their soul, they're living off whatever they compromise, and that's something they got to deal with for the rest of their life. And if you have your soul, just realize that at least you have that, and you can look at yourself in the mirror and know that you don't hate yourself because of something you did to get to where you're at. And at the end of the day, you don't really know what you get there, if it's even all that worth it. You driving around, you got $2 million car, $6 million house, and you're around all these people, and you realize that the shit is all empty. The girl that's, hot, you busting her cheeks, and it's just basically going through the motions. You're hanging out with these people, they're all fake. It's everybody's acting stupid, goofy. Everything's just like props, and you're like, what's the point? Most people get that stuff, the car, they drive it a few times. They're not taking on any road trips. They drive it, floss, you got somebody sitting with you that's only there because they want to be seen with you to get famous too, and they're using you like you're using them. And there's nothing real. It's all fake. There's no substance. There's no value. Nobody that's going to be there at the middle of the night to come get you if you get stranded, or if you need somebody to help you out, or if you need that phone call. These people, man, they're not going to pick up. But you sold your soul to be around them. And you think now you the man because people see you got a hell of a likes on your picture or follows on your page. That's the price, man. If that's what you want, then hey, man. But to me, that shit is garbage. I've been around a lot of those people, man, and seen people, and it's an act. They're pretending they're happy. They're pretending they're this. And I'm not saying everybody. Yeah, I know some genuine people that have worked hard. They didn't sell their soul. They, built things up from the ground up. But some people, man, you could just see like they're trying to act like what they think they should be acting like because they're in the position they're in. But it's not genuine. And a lot of those people have sold their soul. So value your life, value your spirit, value your temple. Don't let it be defiled just like for a trade-off that's not worth it. Keep your temple pure as you can. And I'm not trying to, like I said, judge anybody, man. Look, I've been at cheek busting sessions and different things, and to each his own, adult wise. But I didn't sell it wasn't like I wasn't letting nobody bust my cheeks. I was having a good time. It was all consensual. But as far as like the trade off for some wealth, to be in some role or this and that for the money, I mean, man, shit. That I'm cool. I would rather just do my thing and have fun with things I want to participate in. But when you start doing stuff you don't want to participate, but you're participating, and then you no longer want to participate, that could be a problem too. Because your soul, once it's sold, that's a wrap. BigHerc916, man. Subscribe, share, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about and who you think has sold their soul for the price of fame. Never settle for average.
Don't forget to stop by the BigHerc916 store and pick you up a sticker for your car, or a patch, or a sticker for your laptop, or maybe a beanie, or read one of the many books that BigHerc916 has authored. You know how we do it.